From the very beginning, I used to teach the Second Amendment in law school. From the very beginning, there were limitations. You couldn't own a cannon. You couldn't. You could own a rifle, a gun, but there were certain things you couldn't. But they weren't weapons of war.
Okay, you can own a cannon, you absolute clown turd. You can own a cannon, and weapons of war are what won this country's independence. Welcome back to the program. Dana Lash here with you. Biden says it again. He says you can't. I've written about this. I don't know how many times. Do not know how many times. He has claimed, even the Washington Post has said, this is bad. You can't say that. He repeats this false claim. He did this in 2021. Washington Post gave him 4 Pinocchios for it. He did it in 2022. PolitiFact even said that's not true. I mean, you absolutely can own a cannon. That's a lie. And you can own a tank as well. I don't know if people are aware of that. You can also own a tank. So the limitations that he's talking about had to do with things that weren't commonly owned. And that's a phrase that Antonin Scalia had even touched on before I get too further. Again, welcome back. Dana Lash with you. Top of our second hour, listen coast to coast, and channel 347 on DirecTV. In the decision with Heller, and I've written about this as well, I've got several books on it, Scalia had noted that at the time, and these are, which we all agree, Biden did not teach on the Second Amendment. Biden has no idea what he's talking about. The only restriction was in the era of the colonies, one of the things that the colonies all agreed on is the idea of something that was an uncommon weapon. And the example that Scalia gave in his opinion on Heller is if it's something like a head axe, right? If it was something that looked like, like Negan's bat from Walking Dead, like his bat with barbed wire all over it, that's kind of an uncommon weapon, right? And if you're walking around with something uncommon, and if it also had to include the caveat was if you're walking around with something that's uncommon, an uncommon weapon, and you're doing so menacingly, meaning that you are brandishing it with intent to intimidate or threaten, that's the restriction that came into play. And that's what Scalia verbatim was talking about in his opinion on Heller that I've covered again over at my newsletter, on my website, in books, on television, etc. So the restriction that Joe Biden is talking there is he has no idea what he's talking about. You can own cannons, you can own tanks, in fact, the cannons have always been in private ownership. In fact, when Washington was getting the army together, one of the first things that they did was they were going around to farmers and other people who had previously served in military battles, military campaigns that maybe had kept some of the cannons, etc., had owned them privately to enlist them into helping the Continental Army. And so this idea that they were never in private ownership actually is a rewrite of American history, because this country began with them all being in private ownership. I mean, firearms began all in private ownership. We could not afford to supply every infantryman with a rifle. In fact, you were expected to bring your own, which gets into some of the wording of the Second Amendment. Whenever you hear the phrase well-regulated militia, you have so many uneducated people out there, and it's actually terrifying how dumb these people are. They are not well-read. They're not very intellectual. They don't really have any real academic pursuits, and they have no grasp of American history, nor do they have any understanding of the parlance of the time. When they're talking about well-regulated militia, they're talking about people, and as George Mason noted, it is the whole of the people, every man and woman, save for a few politicians, was his direct quote in discussing it. But when they were talking about the well-regulated militia, they were talking about someone who could actually clean and use his firearm proficiently. That's what they were talking about. And that's what the language meant at the time. But people today who speak with emojis don't really understand that. And this is why education is so incredibly important. And so Joe Biden's attempt to rewrite history on this is shameful. It's shameful. And I think he's one of the dumbest. I don't think he's a smart man. I really don't. You know how you meet people and maybe they don't have, I've met some people that have all of these Ivy League degrees, and I think they're some of the dumbest people that's ever existed, because you cannot buy actual intelligence. You cannot buy street smart. You can't buy actual intelligence. You cannot purchase intellectual curiosity. You cannot make a lazy person be an autodidact, meaning someone who constantly wants to learn and is motivated by their own, just motivated from within to do so without having to be compelled by any kind of outside influence. And so that's Joe Biden he's a dumb man. He's just dumb. When people said that George Bush was dumb, I actually disagreed with him because George Bush was actually you can dislike his policies. I know I'm not relitigating that. I would rather literally cut my own arms off and squirt you with the blood from the arteries than actually sit here and diverge from this discussion and argue that. He was not a dumb guy, right? He was a smart individual. He, I think, allowed that narrative of him being dumb to give him cover. Like he wanted to give himself some cover. It gave him some plausible deniability with certain things. And he used it to his advantage against his political opponents. And you don't have to like him to think that Reagan was an incredibly smart guy as well. Didn't have Ivy League degrees, etc. Joe Biden is stupid. Like even Bill Clinton is an intelligent person. Joe Biden is dumb as a box of rocks. He's a male bimbo. He is a male bimbo. He and his wife are not smart people. He is not a smart person. He has no concept of the things that he talks about. He does not understand foreign policy. At least Jimmy Carter understood a little bit the foreign policy when he was talking about a specific area, or if he was getting a domestic issue wrong. At least he was lying to you. He was being malicious and misrepresenting it. Biden's not even doing that. He's not even smart enough to misrepresent it. He's just stupid. And that's the thing. Like, you can't think that everybody on the left is just dumb. Some of them actually are very intelligent. And they will maliciously misrepresent things to you. And they will do like what Bush did. They will allow you to think that they're dumb so that you don't actually see what they're doing that's smart. But Joe Biden is just dumb. He is not a smart man. His kids are dumb. His wife's not bright. He's got dumb people in his administration. For crying out loud, his spokesperson can't even say emeritus. Can't even say it. What did she say didn't she say expletive incorrectly too? Literally just the other day.
I mean, tyranny.
Didn't she say expletive or something like that? And I think I died. Tyranny. What else did she say? The Nord Stream pipeline the Nordstrom pipeline. I can't even say it incorrectly. The Nordstrom pipeline instead of the Nord Stream pipeline.
And she mispronounced like Democrat politicians' names, like from Hawaii and other people. Like it's just horrible.
And then Jill Biden can't even say anything. She can't pronounce anything correctly either. And Joe Biden can't even talk. So he's not a smart dude. But the idea that, these people they didn't own cannons. This was, shut up. That's not true. Have you seen, he's been meeting with the Japanese prime minister. I don't know if you guys have seen some of this. So he met with the Japanese prime minister, Fumio Kishida. They have a state visit at the White House today. And they were walking around on the grounds. I watched some of this video before I saw this New York Post piece, and I thought the same thing that the New York Post piece thought. I thought, this is so embarrassing. Like, he's shuffling around in the grass, right? And he was greeted with a salute by a military aide, and then he turned, he was going to salute, and then it's like he forgot what he was doing while he was doing it. And he just had a blank look. He put his sunglasses on to hide the fact that he walks around just like a complete blank slate. It just looks so bad. He is just in constant confusion. Like he's saluted by a military aide, and he kind of does one of those, puts his arm up, and then he has really no idea what he's doing. The prime minister of Japan knows exactly what to do. The military aide literally has to use his hands and guide Biden absolutely everywhere. And he even is using his body to kind of lean in and direct him where to go. Biden looks so awkward and not healthy. He looks like a guy from Men in Black, an alien in a human suit. That's what he looks like. It is so bad, Kane.
Maybe onto something.
It's so bad. Juan's showing on the simulcast now. And you see the guy gesture. You see how far that aide puts his hand in front of Biden. Like he knows that he's dealing with a guy who is not, all his rockets aren't firing. The prime minister of Japan knows where to go. He's looking around, everything. Biden has no clue what the hell he's doing. It is so awkward, right?
Yeah, the gait of his walk is really concerning because look at the gait of the prime minister's walk. It seems to be just normal and fine.
Biden's like marching. He's marching like you just got balance and you don't really know what to do.
Right, like he's avoiding stepping on his corns or something.
It's like watching a woman who can't walk in high heels try to walk in high heels for the first time, right? Have you ever seen that? Like I see women in heels and I'm like, oh my gosh, you got to learn how to walk in them.
They're like baby deer.
Yeah, he's walking like a woman who does not know how to walk in heels. He's like clomping, like marching. He's lifting his knee up like high. It's weird. It's so weird. So I don't know. He's led around the White House lawn. They had this event. Biden thanked him for I guess Japan gave us 300 cherry trees. And 3,000 cherry trees over a century ago. And he's like, look at, they were talking about the cherry blossoms. Steve, are cherry blossoms, are they still going? Is that past peak?
The peak bloom's all done. They're pretty much just like closer to green now, just like regular trees. It's back when it's like chilly out.
So they had, because that was a gift from Japan some years ago. And so they had their meeting and there's another photo of them. Okay, so here's another photo. It was a Getty image where they're waving at everybody and Jill's waving and Kishida's waving and his wife's waving. And Biden's just holding his fist up. It's weird. He's holding his fist up and he's like making this weird like grimace. He just does not. And the reason I say all this is because this is a guy, we've all had somebody in our family who had a health issue. Everybody. And you've seen people who've had strokes before. This guy, you cannot tell me this guy has not had a stroke.